There is something that God has put within the human spirit, within the spirits of each and every one of us here, that allows us in moments of slump, in moments of depression, in moments of frustration, allows us to reach deep within and even to our own surprise, find what it takes, find the energy, find the exhilaration, find the motivation to rise from that slump and succeed. I don't know, you must have left the senior faces at home, because everybody seems youthful, and clearly you are not the people who are in slumps. You have come here to take the message back to those who are in slumps. I was hoping to see some long faces, you know, and some really slumpy looking faces, but clearly you have come merely to be ambassadors, to take the message back, and I have no problem with that. But I believe that all of us here remembers and will never forget Hurricane Gilbert. I was working in Central Kingston at that time, social work. And one of the things that I recall is that I slept about 2 hours per night, if so much, during that period. I remember we were in church the Sunday that Gilbert struck, and as it became evident to the prophets at the Met Office that Hurricane Gilbert would strike, definitely, we left church. We went down to the city council's office. We called a meeting of all those concerned, and we tried to put a plan in place, or rather the plan that we had already designed, we tried to put it in place. I remember I had never, of course, gone through a hurricane before. I shouldn't say of course. I had never gone through a hurricane before. I didn't know what a hurricane was, apart from what you read in the textbook. And as you know, there's a big difference between theory and practice. And I didn't understand what it meant for Gilbert to turn back. Now, all of us now know that Gilbert has a reverse gear. Gilbert can go forward, and when Gilbert finished going forward, Gilbert can wheel and come again. We know that now. But I didn't know that then. So after Gilbert seemed to have gone, I, of course, was manning a rescue team and food being delivered to the shelters and so on. In spite of the warnings, in spite of what the experts said, it just didn't seem to make sense for me to sit down there. So I got outside, got my team outside, we hit the road, and we started to take food around to the various places. Well, you know who was wrong? You know who was right? You got it right. I was wrong, and they were right. And we were out on the road when Gilbert turned back. By the time Gilbert turned back, and if you remember Hurricane Gilbert, when he came back the second time, he came slightly heavier and harder than he came the first time. And when Gilbert turned back, I was on the road. I drove my Jeep as fast as I could. I got into the shelter, but only into the yard. There was a huge tree, and when I say huge tree, I mean the tree would easily take up half of this room, the branches. Real one of those real huge, real large trees. And you know when you turn on a fan, and you put a fan next to a piece of paper, a piece of light paper, like toilet paper, for instance, tissue paper. You know what the fan does to it? And I saw that tree swaying and swaying and swaying. The trunk of that tree, well, I'm not a very good example for size, but the trunk of that tree was at least about 4 times my trunk, probably more. And I saw that tree sway and sway and sway. And it was a schoolyard, and that school was about 30 feet away from the entrance to the school. And one of the things that I saw happen, I saw the people inside the school, they opened the door and they said, come in, come in, come in, come in. But before I could have got into the school, the first thing I had to do was to get out of the car. Now, I'm traveling in a Jeep, and this is one of these, not one of the Land Rovers. It's one of the Japanese Jeeps. And I hope I never have to give this speech in Japan. But it's one of the Japanese Jeeps, and they're noted for their speed and so on, efficiency and fuel and so on, but they're not noted for their sturdy build. So I had to decide, do I stay in the Jeep or do I get outside? I decided to stay in the Jeep. And every time the breeze blew to that side and the tree leaned to me, I tried to time it. I said, no, when the tree leaned away from me, that's the time to get out. Soon after that, debris started to fly all about the place. And I decided that it was now or never. I could sense the wind blowing louder and louder. I could sense that things were getting worse and worse. And I decided that it was now or never. I opened the door of the Jeep. I counted 1, 2, 3, and then I dashed. Now, there's a song we used to sing in Jamaica a couple of years ago. I don't have a head for songs, but I remember the part that interests me. Quarry was a boy to I man. He could not follow. Sorry, could not, sorry. Could not follow. He couldn't follow me. I don't know whether it was a duppy or a gunman. All I know is that Hurricane Gilbert was better than both of them put together. And I dashed that 30-yard dash. What's the record? I don't know. A 30-foot dash rather. Takes about how long? Whatever it takes, Quarry, it took me half the time. And I got into that shelter just in time to hear the people say, so I said to myself, good, they were, Flash hadn't come on TV yet, you know what I mean? But clearly they were imagining, hey, this guy must have come from a cartoon, you know what I mean? He got to be Flash. But that was not what they sighed for. That was not what they gasped at. What I could not see was that a small fraction of a second after I got into that building, a 4x4 piece of timber broke loose from the ceiling of the school and came right down and sealed the door. As a matter of fact, when you're running fast and you have to draw sudden brakes, you run, and they have to break up like that. And it was that act of breaking up like that that caused that timber to miss my head. When I got inside and I realized what had happened, and I looked back and I saw how close to death I was, I began to laugh. Then I began to cry. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have experiences in our lives that take us from one emotional plateau to another, that takes us from the mountaintop into the valley. And one of the things that I want us to understand about slumps is that it is nothing unnatural. There is nothing special about slumps. There's nothing bad about the concept of a slump. People have slumps every day. As a matter of fact, if you understand the way that God made us, slumps are as natural, slumps are as normal, slumps are as inevitable as life itself.